Well, good morning. I got to tell you right from the start how much I love Kingsland Baptist Church. I was sitting there looking at all of the families, all of the marriages we're celebrating, golden anniversaries, and I was humbled and joyful about Kingsland, what Kingsland represents. You know, one of our core traits here at Kingsland is collective legacy, and I am so grateful to be a part of a church that has such wonderful examples. I celebrated my own anniversary last week, 19 years of marriage, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job. Little did I know that compared to some of these marriages, my marriage is still just a freckle-faced teenager, right? So last year, my marriage is a teenager, and the next year we're going to move on. But there are people who've been married 3 times as long as me. What an amazing place to be involved in ministry, to be surrounded by people who, Hebrews says that we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. God puts in our midst people who can encourage us to run our race well by showing us the path that they walked and what we can learn. I'm so grateful to be a part of a church that provides so many opportunities like that to grow. So I'm just excited about that this morning. That's all I want to talk about. No, have you ever met somebody who was almost famous? Andy Warhol, the controversial 20th century artist, said, everybody in the future will be given their 15 minutes of fame. My brush with fame came March 5th, 2018. I was woken up. I didn't wake up to my alarm. I was woken up that morning to my phone buzzing, getting texts and emails and calls. My phone was blowing up because people were like, oh my goodness, did you see it? Did you read it? Oh my goodness. People I hadn't heard from in years. Turns out something that I had said was quoted on an international website in an article, okay? That thing that was quoted, the article was entitled, 17 Seriously Funny Dad Tweets That Prove Moms Aren't the Only Ones Who've Got It Hard, okay? The prize tweet, the one that won me my accolades, was this. One of my daughters is currently upset because she can't find her favorite stuffed animal's favorite stuffed animal. So, and so for very briefly, I was an internationally known celebrity. What's interesting though is that moment in my life, that tweet, which interestingly was done 5 years ago last week, represented not one of my successes, but one of my failures. I look back on that moment with a little cringe because it represented a weird time in my life that I had since moved past. You see, I had been going through a time where I felt like my career was faltering and my finances were unsure, and I was unconcerned. I was worried about where my life was headed and didn't know if it was going to turn out like I thought. And so I was desperately trying to find something I could hold on to give my life meaning and to know that I mattered. And I did like most people do in our society. I turned to trying to be funny and getting noticed on social media. And I tried for a while, just like funny tweets, funny quotes, funny pictures, getting attention, right? And then one day I realized the great calamity of what I was doing. I had spent an entire evening fiercely engaged on social media, people I didn't even realize or didn't even know, and I had neglected my entire family. And then I stumbled upon a guy who had 500,000 followers, and I didn't even know who he was. And I thought, wow, I could have 1,000 times more followers than I currently do, and I could still be just as anonymous as that guy. And that's when I realized that the only people who were gonna care that I existed, no one in the world was gonna care that I existed more than the then 5, now 7 people who live in that house with me. And that if I got that wrong, no success in any other area of my life would matter. So I had my priorities messed up. You see, the desire wasn't the issue. The problem was where I was seeking to find fulfillment. All of us have an inborn God-given desire to have lives that matter. We want our lives to count and be significant. We want to find fulfillment and joy and purpose, and we want to know that it was important that we were here. The problem is we go off looking in so many other ways to try to find fulfillment, and all we end up finding is heartache and despair. One of the things I love about Kingsland is our mission statement, inviting all people to experience true fulfillment in Jesus Christ, one home at a time. I'm not saying that it's one among many. It's a really good place to find fulfillment, or try this along with other things. The Kingsland's mission says, the only place you will ever find joy, purpose, meaning, and fulfillment comes when you seek it primarily by being a follower of Jesus. Anything else is just what the prophet Jeremiah calls an empty well, a broken cistern that won't hold water and that will always leave you thirsty. This summer, we're doing a series called Encounters with Jesus, where we're looking at the encounters Jesus had with people in the Gospel of Matthew. Today, I want to look at an encounter that Jesus has. A woman comes to anoint Jesus, and afterwards, Jesus looks at her and says, what she has done has given her a memorable life, a life worth remembering. And I hope by looking at what she did, we can figure out the secrets, the steps that we can take so that we can find the same kind of meaning and purpose, fulfillment, so that we can live a life worth remembering. The story occurs in Matthew chapter 26. It goes like this. While Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman approached him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. She poured it out on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw it, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This might have been sold for a great deal and given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a noble thing for me. You'll always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. By pouring this perfume on my body, she has prepared me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. You see, what she had done showed that she was living a life that was worth remembering, and Jesus commented on that. What we know from the way this story is told in the Gospels of John and Mark, we know that this story happened the day before the triumphal entry. Okay, the day before the triumphal entry, they're having a dinner at this person's house, and from the other Gospels, the woman's unnamed in this story, we know that it's Mary, the sister of Martha, the sister of Lazarus. Mary walks in with very expensive perfume, and we know that also from another one of the Gospels that it's worth about a year's wages. She breaks the bottle, she pours it on his head, and she anoints him. What is going on? Why does she do this? Well, a lot of people think that with all the talk of the triumphal entry and things coming to a head, that she has figured out that Jesus is the Messiah and wants to publicly declare that she realizes that Jesus is God's promised chosen one. And so she anoints him like the Messiah, and he responds by saying, yes, she's anointed my body, but for burial, indicating that, yes, he was the Messiah, but no, it wasn't going to go the way he thought, the way people thought. But I want to look today at what she did. Why was she able to do this, and what were the things that can lead us to find a life worth remembering? The first thing she did is she responded to the call. She responded to the call. It needs to be said that God acts first. God's not waiting for us to come up with some good idea and pitch it to him, and then he'll back us, right? Mary didn't just come up with this idea. Remember, this is the same Mary in the Gospel of John. This happens in John chapter 12. In John chapter 11, she saw Jesus raise her brother from the dead. This is also the Mary that sat at the feet of Jesus while Martha was cooking in the kitchen. Remember, Martha complained and said, hey, Jesus, tell her to help me. And Jesus says, no, Mary has chosen the better part and it won't be taken away from her. You see, Mary had heard Jesus speak. She had seen Jesus act, and she is responding. God always acts first, and God is calling us to respond to him. God created this world and created Adam and Eve and put them in a garden and gave them a job to do, right? Jesus in John chapter 10 said, he is the good shepherd. He calls each of his sheep by name, and they hear his voice and they respond. When we try to find a meaningful life by trying to generate our own ideas about what fulfillment looks like, we end up inevitably finding failure. One of my favorite verses, Psalm 127:1 says this, unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor over it in vain. Unless the Lord keeps watch over a city, the watchmen stay alert in vain. If you aren't doing the work that God has for you, you will always, no matter how good you are at it, no matter how excited you are for it, you will always find failure, because unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor on it labor in vain. So the first step to finding a meaningful life is to seek God, to search for him, to see where he is acting, see how he has already gifted, equipped you, and placed you where you are, and then to respond to his call. Mary did. She invites us to do the same. Second, recognize the cost. Recognize the cost. Everything comes at a cost. Many of us are worried that our lives won't add up to anything, and so we try to hedge our bets. We try to keep a lot of irons in the fire, right? We are worried about giving too much to one area. We believe in the Jesus thing, and we want to become followers of Jesus, but we also are worried that maybe career is the place I'm supposed to find fulfillment, or maybe my bank account, or maybe my travel schedule, or maybe my pleasures, or whatever. We try to spread ourselves thin, trying to hope that one of these bets will pay off. And that's literally not the way it works. Jesus cannot give us fulfillment until he is Lord, and he is not Lord at all unless he is Lord of all. The prophet Jeremiah records God as saying, "You will seek me and you will find me when you seek me with all your heart." It's not just one among many searches. It's the primary search of your life to seek and to find God. Jesus, most of the time we walked around, he invited people to follow him, but he spent most of his time asking people if they realized what it would cost them to be followers of Jesus, right? Matthew chapter 16, verse 24 says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'If anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life because of me will find it.'" That's the secret. That's the bizarre nature. That's the problem with the call. He invites us to lay down our whole life, and that is the only way that we'll ever find true life. He tells a parable this way in Matthew chapter 13, where he says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field that a man found and reburied. Then in his joy, he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field." Jesus isn't trying to ruin your life by telling you to lay down all those other things that you currently enjoy. He is saying those other things will only ever find their proper place when you are willing to lay them at my feet. He is offering you true joy and peace and fulfillment, but the price is all you have. He promises in exchange to fill up everything that's lacking. He promises to take all of those things that you are currently exalting and treating like gods to make to wring their necks, to make them give you fulfillment. He says, anything you try to keep back for yourself will never be truly yours. But the things that you give to me will learn to find their proper place at the foot of the cross. All those other things cease to be demons when they cease to be gods. See, this woman realized it. This woman recognized the cost. In Mark's gospel, it says she took the alabaster jar and she broke it. She took something that was worth a year's wages, and she didn't just pop the top off and see how little she could get away with giving to Jesus. She was not turning back. She was going to spend all of it. She broke it and she poured it all out. What do you have at your house that's worth a year's wages? Could you give it all unconditionally to Jesus and to do it joyfully? She recognized the cost. Third, reject the critics. Reject the critics. Acts of devotion and discipline are always misunderstood. The world is full of people who are determined to disagree with you no matter what you do. In fact, I'm kind of convinced that the theme of the internet, the tagline of the internet should be people telling people they're doing it wrong since 1992, right? Like you get online and no one's doing it right. Oh, you do this, well, you're doing it wrong. You do this, you're doing it wrong. Everybody is a judge of everybody else's behavior and intent and motivation, and everybody has something to say about what other people are doing. A meaningful life is found when you stop focusing on them and start and reject those critics and start focusing on Jesus. Look at what Mary does. The situation breaks down this way. Matthew says, when the disciples saw it, they were indignant. "Why this waste?" they asked. "This might have been sold for a great deal and given to the poor." John's gospel adds this further dimension. Then one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was about to betray him, said, "Why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of the money bag and would steal part of what was put inside of it. The disciples thought she was wasteful. They tried to sound high and mighty, but the truth is, they wanted to steal. Mary's worship revealed Judas's God. When we see and savor and focus and follow the real Jesus, it will expose the gods on the thrones of other people's hearts. And they will be loud and vociferous that you're doing it wrong, that you shouldn't have done that, and you should have done it better, you should have done it. People are always going to do that. Notice there is no record of anything that Mary said in any of these stories to any of those people. She does not care. She is focused only on Jesus. And she does this, and then she leaves. It's Jesus who defends her. It's Jesus who says, leave her alone. It's Jesus who said, if you want to help the poor, there's always an opportunity. Why don't you go do it? No, you're just complaining because you're a complainer. You're a critic. You like pointing out how people who actually do things could have done it different. You leave her alone. We need to learn to reject those critics. Not to reject good advice, not to reject the wise counsel of people that God put in our life as mentors, but reject the people whose voices are just judges. People who want to condemn you, no matter what you do, for how you could have done it differently. And the only way you'll ever do this is if you change your focus from them to Jesus. Hebrews 12:1-2 says this, therefore, since we're surrounded by so large a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus. Don't focus on the road. Don't focus on the bystanders. Don't focus on the critics. Reject those critics. Just keep your eyes on Jesus, and you will be able to run the race that's set before you well. Last, refocus on can. Refocus on can. What do I mean by this? Right now, if I asked you, tell me what's wrong with your life, you could find it. You would give me the list. You could say all of the problems that are going wrong and all of the obstacles you are currently facing that are keeping you from getting to the life that you so desperately want. It's almost like we can see it just beyond the ridge, right? And we desperately hope for it, and we see all these obstacles. Maybe we need to stop focusing on all the things that are wrong with our life and refocus on all of the things that are currently right. Don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can. One of my favorite things about this story in Mark's gospel, when Jesus chastises the disciples, he simply says, leave her alone. She's done what she could. It doesn't say she did everything. It doesn't say she fixed the problem. It says she did what was up to her to do. And that was it. When you get so consumed by where you think you need to be and all the things that are in your way, you will end up becoming the kind of person who thinks that your life will find fulfillment only if you are doing something else with someone else, somewhere else. That you think your hope and fulfillment lies someplace other than where you currently are. Most of us have an incredibly difficult time with these three words: here, now, and this. Our vision is always distracted to somewhere else. And we need to realize that God hasn't forgotten us. God hadn't abandoned us. God hasn't forsaken us. God has actually strategically placed us where he has and uniquely gifted us so that we can be the people he's calling us to be for his glory and for our good. If we refocus on can and do what we can where we are with what we have, we will find the life and the peace that God has for us. Ephesians 2:10 says it this way: for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time for us to do. It's actually more clear in the Greek. It actually says he created us for good works, which he laid out in front of us to walk in. You don't have to find the path God has for you. You have to just be willing to walk in the good works that he's already laid out in front of you to walk in. See, the problem is you think real life is happening somewhere else. And most of us are unwilling to just simply do the thing in front of us, do the thing we can do with the stuff he's already equipped us to do it with. How's this hitting you today? I'm not gonna ask you if you want to live a life worth remembering. I'm not gonna ask you if you want to find fulfillment. Those are all innate desires in us. You are wired by God to desire for your life to count for something. What I'm going to ask you is, do you realize what it takes to do it? Are you ready to respond to the call? Are you willing to just to zero in on, to seek after Jesus and seek him with your whole heart, to hear him call you by name and to run the race he lays in front of you to run? Do you recognize the cost? Are you okay with realizing that nothing you hold back for yourself will ever be yours, and everything that you give to him will not be truly lost? Is your life full of the critics yelling in your ear to do it differently, and do you need to learn to focus on Jesus? And maybe you just need to refocus your life on Can. You see so clearly all the things you can't do or couldn't do or are frustrated by, and all the things that are keeping you from the life you think that you want for yourself, that you've forgotten maybe that God has placed you exactly where he wants you and has equipped you to do a specific job, and you are right here for such a time as this. And maybe the life worth remembering will be found when you just start refocusing on Can and fixing your eyes on walking in the good works he's already laid in front of you to walk in. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you made us to matter. Thank you that you call us into relationship with yourself. Thank you that you lay good works in front of us to walk in. Forgive us for all the ways in which we get distracted by all other potential sources of fulfillment. Help us to zero in on you and seek you with our whole heart. Father, help us to recognize the cost and eagerly pay it out of joy that knowing that nothing we hold for ourselves will ever be ours, and nothing that we lay at your feet will ever be truly lost. Father, help us to fix our eyes on you and reject the critics that keep yelling in our ear that will never be good enough and that will never matter and that will never amount to anything. Father, give us the ability to joyfully just walk in the works that you've laid in front of us. Help us to run with endurance the race that's set before us, fixing our eyes on you, the author and perfecter of faith. Father, you began the good work in us. Bring it to completion. Draw us closer together and closer to you. I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.